Welcome to PASSIONEER Magazine The Podcast, where you'll hear inspirational stories, encouraging news, and in-depth interviews with authors, influencers, CEOs, and thought leaders. PASSIONEER Magazine The Podcast. Bold ideas, brave pursuits, boundless inspiration. Hello. Thank you, Glenn, for joining me here on PASSIONEER Magazine, the podcast. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Angela. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Now, I cannot wait to talk to you about all that you are doing, but I realize I may be introducing you to some new viewers, to some new listeners out there. So first question for you, tell us a little bit about yourself. What makes you you?
Awesome. I'm from Canada. I now live in Orlando. I'm like to say a three-time entrepreneur. I have over 40 years now. I clicked into the 40 years I started in 1985. So that brings me to 41 years now, I guess. So they're clicking away quickly. So building and exiting companies. So I'm sort of on my third iteration now in a new country, in a new technology area. And I've started and sold 2 distribution businesses and now building my third. Along the way, I wrote a book called Never Sit in the Lobby, where I teach some practical lessons on sales and growing a business. And I focus most of my time on sales, leadership, entrepreneurship, and discipline. And, I believe that growth comes from clarity, trust, and a steady vision.
Now, I love that you have successfully built businesses. You have been able to do the entrepreneurial thing the way that you wanted to do it and to fully express yourself from start to finish, from industry to industry. What drives someone to understand that now is the time to reset? Now is the time to let this baby go and to do something different. How should one understand if they have the nudge?
Yeah. So, a lot of people want to be sort of entrepreneurs, but, honestly, it isn't actually for everyone, right? Some people do like the security of having a paycheck, and you have to give that part a lot of thought, right? And so, I mainly explain to people how to become an entrepreneur, because really that you can't really tell someone before you're an entrepreneur, you're not, right? And the but I mean, not everyone is, right? I'd say probably like 5% of the population are really cut out to quit their job, lose their benefits, lose their paycheck, and go it alone, right? And so you have to really have a soul searching, and in order to make that leap, there's sort of 3 things that you need, right? You need a minimum viable product that you want to offer to the world. It could be a service, it could be software, it could be a product. What are you going to do? And it has to be sellable today, right? It doesn't have to be perfect. And that's a big mistake people make. Oh, it's got to get better and better and better, and they never do it, right? So you need a product to sell that's at a point where you can start selling it. And then 2, you need, and this is important, you need 18 to 24 months of food and money and rent in the bank, right? So, or you need you need a very understanding spouse that has a job or that's willing to support you, so that you don't have to pull money out of the business in the first 2 years, because you're going to want to and what have you, and it really needs that time to grow and blossom. Right. And then the third thing that you need is a customer that you don't deserve. Right. And people are like, what do you mean by that? And I'm like, well, the very, very, very first customer, they might trust you from a different world that you're in, your old job, your old business, but in your new business, you're unproven. So someone has to take a chance on you. And so, frankly, you don't deserve that particular piece of business. And so you got to be lucky enough that you get someone to trust you. Of course, you have to work to keep the business and make sure that you do right by the customer. And then after that, you just earn them one at a time after that. Right. And those are all the 3 things that you need. Right. And And then the last final leg of it is the getting over the fear. And so I always tell people, like, think of the fear like this. Most people, they sort of come up against a wall. Oh, I'm going to quit my job this week or next month, or I'm going to do this and then I'm going to quit. And they keep sort of hitting this wall and bouncing off of it and not making that leap, right? Well, if you have those other things lined up, when you're on this side of the wall and still working, the wall becomes an obstacle which prevents you from moving forward, right? And all you really need to do, is just climb up that wall and jump over it, right? And I mean, that's where you have to have faith. And you just have to, darn the torpedoes or whatever they say, right? Or and jump over the wall, because now you were scared on this side of the wall and you were hitting it and bouncing off and going back to work every day. But on the other side of the wall, you're 10 times more scared. But what it does is push you away from the wall and pushes you forward towards your goal. And when you look back, the wall's behind you now. It's no longer holding you, right? And the fear that was holding you back is now the fear that will propel you forward out of sheer terror of going bankrupt, not eating, not paying the rent, etc. And every day you look back and the wall's farther and farther behind you. And before you know it, 6 months have gone by and, you're a business person and, you're in business. Right. And so that's how the story of entrepreneurship and how you do it. Right. And I mean, just a quick little joke or aside for everyone is that when I started my first business in 1991, I approached my employer about spinning off a business unit and they refused me. So I just up and quit the next day. And I didn't have a minimum viable product. I didn't have the money in the bank. And I had a spouse, but I'd only been married 6 days. And I forgot to tell her that I was quitting.
Okay.
I got married the Saturday before the Friday that I quit. And I came home and said, "Oh, honey, I quit." And she's like, "What? Who did I marry?" But anyways, it worked out okay. And so that's just a little bit on my how you go from 9 to 5 to the entrepreneurial journey. So
Oh, I love that. I love that. And I loved how you said, being an entrepreneur is not for everyone. If you like getting that guaranteed paycheck, it might not be for you. And
yeah,
you're so right. People do not understand. It's like you gave up your guaranteed 40 hours a week, paycheck every 2 weeks or every week to 65 hours a week, 80
yeah,
hours a week. I might get paid this month. It's just
yeah.
a prayer, and like you said, a
Exactly.
really great significant other, and it really and truly is true. But having that belief in yourself, I tell folks it's much like being a realtor. You sell a
Yeah,
house and you're like, yes, but you at the same time, you know that you have to pace yourself because you may not sell another house for another 90 days
yeah,
or 6 months or
yeah.
so, but you wouldn't give it up for anything in the world. So if you
That's
can
right.
understand why they do what they do, then you can understand why we do what we do. So I love that perspective. Now, you talk about coming from changing lanes when others stay put. How do you personally know when it's time to pivot? How do you teach that to others? How do you explain it to others? Your pivot is right now.
Well, I mean, yeah. Well, usually when you have to pivot, it's because something sort of changed, right? And when it's time to pivot when sort of growth or stagnation or something is sort of force something that's not natural, right? And so, you're kind of you're at a turning point, right? And so, and if you're pushing hard to get momentum and it's not there, that's a signal to you, right? That your energy's dropping, your curiosity's gone, you're not interested. And if the market's shifted, but you're still defending the old way of doing things, that's something you have to look at. And that's usually your biggest clue that something has to change, right? And, I don't pivot because I'm bored. I pivot when the learning curve flattens or the opportunity ahead is bigger than, the comfort behind me and I have to do something different, right? In my latest business, I've realized that just selling the equipment side of it is not going to get it done. So I've pivoted and now I'm offering the services that go along with it. Right. And in my old world, I never needed to do that. And because it was just enough there. Right. And just the way it was structured, it was kind of like you sell the equipment and we do the services. Right. But in the new technology that I'm in, I have to blend the two together in order to have the winning formula. That's what's coming. And so I've had to pivot because of that. Right. And so, you know, there's probably a lot of ways we can go with the ideas of pivoting, but that's, sort of how I look at it.
Oh. And boy, was that a wise decision to know that it doesn't have to be one or the other, it can be and, right?
Right.
Because someone may have purchased this side, kind of backing out a little bit for other people that are going, is that me? If you offer something and it needs service, maintenance, upgrades, whatever, if you can offer that, then offer that. I think that is definitely wise. Because if not, they're just going to find what they need with someone else. So if you're
Right.
able to upscale, that was so smart. Now, the title of your book, Never Sit in the Lobby. Now, I have to admit, if I saw that at my local Barnes and Noble, I would definitely pause, back up, and thumb through it. We know, of course, it's available on Amazon and wherever books are sold, so definitely pick up a copy. Now, beyond the literal meaning, let me say it again, never sit in the lobby. What does that phrase represent? How do you explain that when it comes to personal agency and mindset?
So yeah, so the Never Sit in the Lobby was a catchy title that the editor helped me come up with because she said my title sucked and I can't remember what it was. I don't even remember now. But she's like, that's not going to sell any books,
That's
right?
not
And so Never Sit in the Lobby is like one of a group of 7 or 8 rules that go together at the beginning, right? And the book is really 57 tips on how to build a career, right? And it's and one of them is never sit in the lobby. And what it means is you want to always be at attention and focused when you present yourself to the customer. And the way they need to think about it is you go in the lobby, you announce yourself, and then what most people do, if you've ever been to a lobby with salespeople, is they kind of sit down and they get on their phone and they start debating the shopping list with their wife, or maybe they're calling another customer to make an appointment, or they're wandering around looking at the plaques on the wall. But in most cases, what ends up happening is there becomes an interruption where the customer presents themselves, maybe your back is turned or you're on the phone and your wife or husband is saying, don't forget the milk and pick up the kids, and you know it's difficult when you're talking with your spouse to just like hang up on them, right? And so what do, right? You make the customer wait, you make the wife wait, and so I put all my devices away and I stand up and I just wait and I show up in just amount of time. So I'm only there for a minute or two, right? I'm due at 2 o'clock. So I'll show up at 1:57, announce myself, and I'll just stand there and wait. Right. And so it's just a rule about always being at attention. So when they walk out, they can introduce themselves and, shake hands and what have you. Right. And the other little subtle aspects of it is I'm actually quite short. Right. So if I'm sitting down and a 6'4" vice president of procurement comes out, right, he's now 4 feet taller than me. Right. And I have to look up at the guy and I have to rise up. And of course, I don't make it all the way because I'm not 6'4", and and offer him my hand, offer him my hand or whatever. And I realized it just wasn't a good look, right? And so almost everything in the book is how not to have a bad look, and and how to be a pleasure to do business with. So, and there's a handful of other rules that go with that little package of rules, and but the main one is never sit in the lobby. So yeah.
Oh,
And,
I love that. I love
yeah.
that. And it is just those, like you said, it's just those little things that can make a huge difference. And you're right. I find that um, when I have interviewed people that do coaching analysis, that they're hired for a particular leader to look at what they have going on and how can they do it better. And I remember one person saying, that rule that says if you don't show up 15 minutes early, then you're late, right? And everyone
Right.
across the world stuck by that. It became, the last verse of the Bible that we live by. And
Yeah.
and they said in that 15 minutes, you'll be surprised at how many people fidget. You can see the nervousness, you can see the
Right.
uncertainty, and they tell on themselves by what they do in that window. But now it makes even more sense about the person who shows up 5 minutes, 3 minutes early, and they don't have that waiting in the
Fidgeting.
lobby,
Yeah.
fidgeting
Yeah.
energy.
Right.
Oh my goodness.
So
I'm gonna share that with
so
folks.
one of
Give me
the one of
credit,
the
don't
sister
worry.
yeah. So one of the sister rules, I'm so glad you brought that up. One of the little sister rules to never sit in the lobby is, you know, on time is late and early is on time is late, right? So I agree with you. The 15 minutes, it is true, but you don't sit in the lobby. You sit in your car, actually, right? And so people are like, what do I do in my car then? I'm there 15 minutes early. Well, that's where you practice the other rule, right? Which is never forget a face rule, right? And so the never forget a face rule is, and now with your phones or laptops, it's so easy. You just whip out your phone and you go to the customer that you're calling on that day, and you've probably been there before, right? Most times, if you're dealing with big business, you deal with them more than once, right? And what you do is you remind yourself of everyone you've ever met there. And so what you do is you bring it from long-term memory, which is very, deep and long and solid, to your short-term memory, which is very fleeting, right? And so, because the worst thing is that while you're waiting, while you're being introduced or to the new person, the other person walks by you and you can't remember their name, right? So what you do is you remember their face and you go through them all, Jack, Sally, Bob, whatever, right? And you say, okay, that's the tall guy, the short guy, the bald guy, the redhead, whatever, right? And you remember all the different, and so that when you see them, there's no remembering because it's already at the front of mind, right? And so, because there's another rule that goes with it called always ask for a mini tour, right? Which is you want to see where your products and services are being used. And you mainly want to get behind the Wizard of Oz curtain at the door where the receptionist sits, because that's where you learn what the customer's doing, how they make their money. And most of all, you want to look and see, hey, what coffee mugs and mouse pads and Stanley mugs and things are being given by your competitors to this customer. So you can figure out where are you in the pecking order, right? And so while you're on the way, if you can get the little mini tour of where your products might be used, you're going to bump into all those people, Jack and Sally, et cetera, and you're going to say hello to them. And this guy's going to say, oh my God, he knows everybody. And Jack and Sally are going to say, oh my God, Glenn's such a pleasure. He always remembers my name, right? And so it's a little package of rules that that move you along the timeline of always being a pleasure to be around and to be to doing business with, which is my mantra, right? And never be a pain in the butt.
I love that. I absolutely positively love that. Now, I think for some people, just being interactive with others, it comes quite natural, but it doesn't for everyone. And to have a book that helps you walk through the do's, the don'ts, the ups, the downs, that's gold for them. I was just having a
Right.
conversation with my mother the other day, and I was telling her, she was complimenting me on, I hosted an event, and she says, you are just such a natural hostess. Like, you are just so gracious with everyone and you give everyone FaceTime. And I said, well, Mom, you taught me how to be that way. Though I think I'm like that naturally. I saw you never overlook a guest. I saw you shake hands with someone who did not donate to someone who donated, a lot to the cause for what you were supporting. That every human being is important. So thank you for seeing the reflection of you. But if I
That's
had
awesome.
not had that, right? I would have needed a resource like your book. I would have needed a consultant, a coach such as yourself to come in and say, these are the things that you are not doing, and this is what you could do to be better. I find that everyone I talk to gives a nugget of wisdom, and that is definitely a nugget of wisdom there. Pick up, learn what you do not know or what doesn't come naturally to you. And everyone wants to feel like they're remembered, that they're
Absolutely.
important. So I love
Yeah,
that.
and that sticks with them. That feeling that they get from you sticks with them, right? They remember that. And yeah.
You really do. You really, really, really do. I've had just over the years and traveling and all of that, people might even say, I don't remember your name, but I know your face. Though we want to remember people's names, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
People will also remember your face if they don't remember your name because they remember how you made them feel. So
Yeah.
you are sharing wisdom here. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Now, you have led companies through scale to exit. What leadership habits do you find that founders, leaders really underestimate, right? Like there are certain ones that I'm sure that they're always saying, "Hey, we got to do one, two, and three," and they forget that five, six, and seven are also important. Are you finding that people are starting to shift the way they understand the importance of the things they do, or are there any that are underestimated that we need to bump them up a little bit more?
So the first thing is like leadership to me is like a gift when you can become a leader. And the the biggest thing that people have to realize is when you're put in a role that's a leadership role, you need to lead, right? Like you're put there for a specific purpose, and you want to be consistent, but you want to lead the people because most people, again, like we talked about entrepreneurs before, not everyone wants to lose their paycheck, right? Just like a lot of people, just when times are tough, the economy's bad, they want the CEO to get up in front of them during the town hall meeting, and they want to tell them what their vision is and how they're going to push through this tough time. And when that leader has a vision and they have a set of decisions that they've made and an action that they're going to take, the team will rally behind them because that's all they really want is a consistent and well-defined path to follow. And so your job as the leader is to provide that. And you kind of leave your hums and your haws back when you're thinking about what you're going to say to them. But when you get in front of them, you want to show them these are the decisions were made. They weren't all easy, a couple of tough ones, but this is how we're going to push through, and I'm confident on the other side we'll be better and stronger for it, right? And people are like, okay, I can get behind that. And even though it means, maybe one of the divisions in, a distant land or whatever, they're closing down, but, the rest of it staying solid, those kind of things, people will understand and they'll rally behind it. Right. And so, they often, and the other thing that's underestimated is the power of listening, right? You weren't sort of, usually when you're in a big kind of meeting with the leadership or whatever, usually the most powerful person is the most quiet person, right? And because they're spending most of their time listening, God gave you two ears and one mouth, so you can do the math. And right. And so, but not waiting to speak, like, oh, I just wish they finished, stop talking so I can blurt out my genius, right? But actually listening, right? Because through the listening, that's when you can start to understand. And from the understanding, you start to craft solutions to the problems. And, you want your leaders to listen more, react less, right? And so, and they look simple, but they're difficult, right? People, they want to offer solutions quickly and spit things out, and but yeah, so those are a couple things that come to mind.
Mhm, mhm. Now, last question for you, and that is along that. So we have started our business. We've done what we needed to do. We have these awesome and amazing professionals that we have hired. So we have these great competent teams. We have decided that we needed to make various pivots along the way because that's just a part of the journey. And we are now at that portion where we have to decide, do we continue to do what we are doing, or do we have to reimagine, re-event? Do we have to, you get where I'm going there? Is there a that we need to do? Many times those reinventions, those recreates require a certain amount of confidence, a certain amount of being sure about self, about product, about trend, about time, and all of that. But it also comes with a bit of humility. So, with someone who's experiencing a how do you help them understand that you can be confident, but you also need to tap into that humility portion as well?
Yeah, so, and I mean, I find humility to be, again, like it's very important that you demonstrate that, right? And so it requires both confidence and humility, just like you're saying, right? And so confidence is trusting your judgment, that, you've made the right decision, and you're saying it in a way that's believable, right? And humility is being honest about the data that's in front of you, and that why you had to make the decision, right? That's where the humility, we made some missteps. We overinvested in, the Florida market, and we should have stayed in whatever, Tennessee or something, something like that. So when leaders are trying to decide, to stay the course or change it up, I always ask, are we being patient, or are we being stubborn, right? And second, is the market pushing us back, or are we just uncomfortable? And so, and the confidence sort of says we can figure it out, and humility says we could be wrong, right? We might be wrong, right? And so that's how I balance humility with confidence. And the best leaders are, they try to hold both in each hand at the same time, right? They commit fully when they're aligned, and they pivot without their ego when the facts demand it. You don't want to, like, again, like, oh, we're staying in no matter what. And right, when the facts change, you have to be able to pivot, right? And you said pivot a few times, so that I firmly believe in that. At times you have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So
it makes me think about, we've heard the stories of the various franchise organizations that now they have they're on Netflix, and we're watching the series because they grew quickly, right? And now they're gone because they didn't listen to the advice of a particular consultant that said, hey, just because you're doing wonderfully right now does not mean that you need to build 100 new stores in 90 days, right? But then also have, as a consumer, we also know what it's like to love a particular store and go, boy, do I wish there was one in my city. But yet, for some things, we are willing to drive that additional hour to get there, or we're willing to go that extra distance or whatever it is, be stuck in traffic because they really do have an awesome and amazing product or service. So you are so right. If we pay attention to those little things, then we can find where that sweet spot is for what we do and who we are. I tell you, Glenn, thank you so much. Award-winning author, AI enthusiast, coach to entrepreneurs, and public speaker. You are doing great and amazing things out there in the world. Thank you so much for coming on and spending time with me here. Now, before I let you go, though, I'm sure there's someone who wants to reach out to you. They want to know more about you, visit your website, follow you on socials. What's the best way to do that?
So super easy. Just log into LinkedIn, type in my name, connect, and converse. And I'm happy to talk to anyone. And I get so much out of conversing with people I meet through sort of the podcast, exchanging ideas, learning things, learning about people they're using. And, it's very rewarding. And so don't be shy. I'm happy to connect and converse with anyone. So
I love it. I love it. Thank you again for being a guest here on Passioneer Magazine, the podcast.
Thank you for listening to Passioneer Magazine, the podcast.